All right, the time is now 8 o'clock. We'll go ahead and move into our 8 a.m. interview. Roll call was taken. We'll go ahead and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. So first of all, we'll begin with introductions, and we'll go ahead and start over here with you, Ms. Trustee Witt.
I am Trustee Keegan Witt, been on the board for about a year now.
Colin Mercer.
Jen Vogel, trustee for 3 years.
Good morning. I'm Vice Chair Nancy Hobbins. Nice to meet you.
Good morning. I'm Chair Walina Oldperson, she, her, hers.
Hi, Dale. Elizabeth Cullivan, District Council.
Arlene Walker Andrews, the high school vice president, and this is my second year.
Hi, I'm Grace Decker, she, her. I've been on the board for almost 9 years.
I'm Jeff Avgaris. I've been on the board for 3 years.
Good morning. I'm Meg Witcher. I use she, her pronouns, and I've been on the board for, under a year.
Good morning. I'm the representative from Lolo. My name is Karen Sherman, and I've been on the board for less than a year.
Morning, Rob Woolick. Been on the board for about a year. Already causing trouble. Had the wrong resume, so had to sort it out here. Nice to meet you.
All right, and so we have 20 questions that we're going to go through and ask you, and each trustee will go through and ask a question. We'll just start over there with Trustee Sherman and go through the questions. I will keep us on a tight timeline because we only have an hour and 15 minutes. So just know that I will just move us along if needed, and our legal is here to help us in case we need to stop anything. BIA has that right to stop any questions or any answers that are coming. All right, go ahead, Trustee Sherman.
Thank you. Although we have a general picture of your career based on your application and video presentation, please take a few minutes to describe your interest in this position, why your skills and experiences make you an excellent fit to become our next superintendent. What has you the most excited about this opportunity?
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Dale Olinger, I'm a he, his kind of guy. The reason I'm very interested in this position, to answer your question in reverse order, is because this is my home. 4 decades living in Missoula has planted the seeds in me that I suspect it has in many of you. I love this community. I've grown up in it. It has raised me in many ways, as has Missoula County Public Schools. So when this job opened up, I really didn't have to think very hard about whether or not it was of interest to me, and it was time for me to give back. So this is my opportunity to do exactly that, to give back to the community that I love, that I've watched change enormously over my lifetime, and I suspect will continue to change. And I'm not going to be somebody to fight the change. I think we need to work with it and adapt to it. And a big piece of that is our public school system. The public schools in Missoula County are strong, and they have been for a very long time. I like to think that a lot of the benefits that I've earned in life are because of the things I learned as an MCPS student. And I don't say that tongue in cheek at all. I mean, you are who you become because of your education, right? And I like to think that if I've enjoyed any success in my life and my career, that's a foundation that was planted here in MCPS, and I want to see that for every other student of the 10,000 some students you have. I want them to have those same opportunities. As far as my career trajectory goes, I was a middle school science teacher. I was one of those people in the education department who actually wanted to teach in middle school, and people thought you were crazy, but I think there's people in this room who understand that. I'm a middle school kind of guy, and I learned later to be an elementary kind of guy, but the act of being in the middle school among people, I may be a 14-year-old somewhere like deep in my heart until the day I die. I understand those kids, I love them, and teaching middle school science was probably the best job I ever had and may ever have. So I don't take that for granted. I then got the opportunity to become an elementary school principal, which reinforced a lot of the things that I'd learned in my elementary education career path, but I didn't get to practice because when you're in teaching 7th and 8th grade science, you're not dealing as much with Title I. You're not dealing as much with teaching kids how to read, how to do those very elementary things, and that got me back into those practices, and I got to lead a Title I school. I got to be with the little kids. I got to remember how to talk to little kids because at the time I didn't have my own small children, and that was really, really meaningful for me. I then got to go back into the middle school. Again, it was kind of my jam because those kids are right in that tween area, which is super awkward, and get to know their parents and all of those things, and it was great. So after middle school principal, I became the superintendent of Lolo, and I could go on for quite some time about that, but in the interest of time, Chair, I will stop my answer there.
Based on your research and knowledge of our system, what do you feel should be the priority work as we head into planning for the next school year?
Thank you. I've had the, coincidental privilege of being kind of an ancillary part of the vision development for Missoula County Public Schools when it started, when this board started that process. Back in 2019, just before the pandemic, I actually got to be one of the community members that was part of the visioning group, and that was really enlightening. I was invited as a representative of one of the outlying school districts, which was terrific to be included, and I got to sit in a room over there several times until, of course, COVID shut us down with that, and then I had some other things that I had to deal with and kind of had to bow out of the committee, frankly. But since then, I know you've continued that work and you've developed that. So no matter what happens in the coming school years, it needs to be highly focused on that overall vision and mission that the board has set out, and then the strategic action goals or the action steps that have been set by like communities of practice and the administrative group and all of those folks. So whether that's continuing to develop the early literacy programs that are available, and I know some of that is in flux right now with the legislature making some changes. Hopefully we can roll with those changes and they won't be devastating to the things that we're trying to do in public schools. So making sure kids have that foundational knowledge to come in is one of the critical steps. But I think a big picture going into the next school year is making sure that there is a continuity, some kind of understanding between all of the schools and the leadership all the way to the central office. And I've heard over the years that has kind of ebbed and flowed and that it's in a better position now than it has been in a long time. But that's something that we need to make sure all of the people who are out in the field everywhere understand their connection to their school and their district and their leadership, because if they don't, we've just got people out there doing their own things, and they're good things, but they're not with a unified mission and vision that comes back to what the board has set for what we're trying to do as a district. So I think keeping that continuity from every angle so it's consistent is really, really important.
Let's talk about leadership. How would you describe your leadership style? And how have you leveraged that style to be successful in your previous positions?
I don't claim it's perfect right off the bat. That would be foolish of me. Humility is a big part of my leadership style, and I like doing everything I can to help my district, to help my teachers, and to help my parents without them ever knowing that it's happened. And that's really powerful to me. I don't ever wave a flag or write an email telling my staff what I've done. I just do it because it's the right thing to do, and it's the right thing for them, and it's the right thing for kids. When I interact with my staff, I listen a lot, and everybody could always do that better and can do it more, but that's something that I've always focused on, because it's not just listening to the words that are said, but it's hearing people and what are they actually trying to say. Because when you're in the superintendent's office, even if you're all fired up about something, you're often, I've found, not actually saying the words you wish you could say. So I found it to be my job to say, okay, this is what I heard. What is it that that person really wanted to tell me? Where are they coming from? What's inside their heart that they're trying to tell me, if it's something good or something bad? And when it's good, it's a little more obvious. But when it's something that's uncomfortable, I feel like it's my job to probe that a little bit and try and tease out the reality of what they're trying to tell me and where they're coming from. Because hearing what they're saying is part of it, but knowing where they're coming from. Is this a parent? Is this a community member? Is this one of my staff? Is this somebody who plays multiple roles? Because in the district I'm currently at, we have that. I know you have similar things here. You've got parents who are staff members. I mean, a lot of your teachers and paraeducators and other folks have have students that are in this district. They're gonna have different perspectives on all of the things that they bring to their leadership. So it's been my style to really try and drill down in a kind way to find out what are people trying to tell me and why are they trying to tell me. And it's at that point that I can help, make a decision on where do we go from here. Is this just something I need to hear? Is this something that requires action? Is this something we need to fix? Is this something we need to celebrate? And based on that, we can kind of go from there. So I guess from a humble perspective and trying to just do all the things that are the right things to do for the people who need it to be done, and also being a really strong listener, I can also be pretty decisive when when a decision has to be made, whether that's in a crisis type moment or just because we have kind of lots of different factions pulling in lots of different ways, and we need to make a decision that's the best for the district at that point in time when there isn't a clear popular vote, so to speak, or if sometimes the popular vote isn't the best for the district. And I'm okay with that from time to time, having to pull that card, and I play that rarely and with a lot of caution, knowing that it may not be the most popular choice. That's the responsibility of being a leader, though. Sometimes you have to make those choices when it may not be popular or fun or anything that gets you a lot of accolades or a coffee the next morning, but it's the right thing to do for the kids or for the district and in the long term.
This is a good follow-up, actually. How do you approach that kind of significant decision-making? And what are the elements you need to consider when you're especially undertaking large-scale sort of change?
Sure. Whether it's a district the size that I'm currently in or the size of Missoula County, it's really important to me to identify all the stakeholder groups that are going to have a say or have an effect based on those kind of large decisions. So that could be leading a district through the COVID pandemic. It could be leading the district through a great big move. It could be leading it through an entire reorganization. So when I say that, I look at all of the different stakeholder groups that are going to have a hand in that. That's our classified folks who really keep the wheels on the bus. That's our teaching staff, our professional staff who are delivering the good stuff to kids all day, every single day. That's our administrators who have their own view because they're pulled between supporting and directing their teachers to also dealing with lots and lots of parent issues, good and bad. And then central office and other support folks and parents. Every kid has a parent or a guardian or somebody in their life who cares about them, and they should care about what happens in that school. I'm not necessarily suggesting that I want 10,000 parents at every single meeting that we have. That's about an important thing. But I want parents to know that they have a voice, because if they don't, they're going to tell you their voice anyway. So better to invite that in a structured way that's helpful and strategic than to get the voice of the parents who weren't heard because they weren't invited in the first place. So I guess on the outside of the bubble, but not any less important, would be the community, because as I said in my opening comments, the school is a big part of the community, no matter what community you're in. It's kind of a proportional player in your community, and people care. Even people who don't have a direct connection by having a student in the school today, maybe they did 10 years ago, or maybe they will in 5 years, people care about what happens in their public schools. To be really honest, we're an expensive animal, in the state of Montana, in the city of Missoula. Schools are expensive, and people really value the work that gets done, but at the same time, they may want to have input from time to time on the big decisions that are happening in the district. I mean, look at what's happening today. You're inviting in all of these stakeholder groups to meet me and 2 other great candidates so they can get a feel for who we are and what our values are. So it can be scaled up or scaled down depending on how impactful the decisions are that need to be made. But identifying the stakeholder groups that are going to be directly impacted by those decisions and getting them at the table as much as possible before those decisions are made is it's paramount.
Okay, along those same lines, could you talk about a successful change initiative you led that made a difference in your previous district?
Yeah. I don't want to talk about going through the pandemic, so I'm going to skip that. But something else that's, it's actually change in progress at our school district would be a significant change in the community attitude toward my current district. I work at Lolo School, if you didn't catch that on the paperwork. Lolo School had a reputation for a long, long time of kind of being the black sheep in the community, even though we are a great big part, clearly the largest employer, impacted lots and lots of lives, and we're a community center. A lot of people didn't like the school. And when I came on board as superintendent, my first job was to figure out why. What's going on there? What is this cultural thing that's going on in our kind of split community as far as supporting the school or not supporting the school? So we had a lot of things to do. We were underpaid, needed a levy, needed a bond, needed a new building. And those, I went through those in about 5 seconds, but those are huge initiatives for a school district that doesn't have community support. So start down the path. And it kind of goes back to Trustee Decker's question, how do you get these, how do you start this change? I involved those people. The first thing I did was go to the people who I heard from the people I trust who said, we don't like the school and we're the most loud about it. So I sat right in their office on day 1 and I said, talk to me. Just the 2 of us. Let's have this conversation. Let's find out where this is going. And it wasn't just a one-time conversation. That went on for months. And when I finally started to crack the egg a little bit and kind of get inside the what's the root of this distaste for the school, I was able to start dispelling frankly, the myths that they had in their minds about what was going on, how money was being spent, who did what, why decisions were made, and so on. And it really came down to a lot of intentional misunderstanding on some people's part, and then distributing that far and wide because they happen to have the platforms to do that with. So once I figured out where it was coming from, I was able to start making the group bigger than myself. I was able to start sending my staff to talk to those folks, sending teachers to talk to those folks. Just talk about the school, let them know what's going on, have a conversation. And over time, what happened then was, I don't know that I changed anybody significantly from one side to the other. But what they did was they said, oh, the school's actually doing some really good work. We understand how our money's being spent now. there's nothing that we can say is hidden. The transparency that's being claimed really exists. I showed them our budget. It was never a secret to begin with, but they hadn't seen it. You want to know how we're spending your dollars? I would be glad to show you. What's this thing, they would say. I'd say, this is what that is. This is how we're spending that. Oh, why is that important? And it was just a matter of really deliberately having those conversations. I don't think, I kind of went down a rabbit hole there, although that was the nature of the question. I don't think Missoula is in that position where the community is questioning the school district a lot. I think there's still a lot of involvement that's desired. But to kind of put a bow on that a little bit, at Lolo, we were able to shift that tide. We were able to pass their first levy in, I think it was 13 or 15 years to support our staff. And that's exactly what it was billed for, and that's exactly what it was spent on to this day. And then the following year, in the middle of a pandemic, we passed a $22 million bond to support a brand new school being built that was, give or take, 30 to 50 years overdue. That's under construction right now, and we're in the change process of getting ready for that new school. And I tell you what, schools accumulate a lot of clutter over 130 years. We have, I cannot tell you the amount of stuff that we have, but we're trying to go through that and clean it up a little bit so we can have a successful move. And with that move comes the opportunity for even more change. The physical environment in which you work or learn really impacts what you do. It's not going to make my teachers better teachers, but it's going to make them more efficient as teams. They're going to be able to do things that they haven't been able to do in isolated buildings with 2 or 2.5 grade levels in them. And so that's the next step in the change process, is to say, not only do you have a shiny new school, but how can we use that to do our jobs better?
All right. So we're on question 6 and we have 20.
We're good.
Okay. Conversely, please describe a time when an idea or plan of yours was not successful. What was your response?
Oh, to pick which one. I'm taking my time. So when I was the middle school principal at Lolo, I thought it was going to be a great idea to create a structured study hall for the kids, because they didn't get that. This was when the idea of giving kids interventions was sort of not really a strong program. We didn't have anything to do, but I knew it needed to be done. I did not do it well. I didn't roll it out well, and it really flopped on its face. And what happened was I said, well, here, teachers, I've designed this into your schedule so you have this time with these kids to do the things that you've been telling me needs to be done. They need help with their math. They need help with their English. They need help on whatever it might be. And I said, okay, here's all that time. I built it into the schedule. And then I did not provide any structure, any guidance. I assumed that because they had the idea, they knew what they were going to do with that time. And I was dead wrong. They did not know what to do at that time. So we struggled with that a lot, and we had to kind of reel it back in. I couldn't redo the schedule at that point, but what we did need to do was take 3 steps backwards and go back to what should have been done before we built that schedule in the first place with the time that was being requested. It wasn't an imposition, but it was certainly, it was half-built, if at best. So that was a clear reminder to me, wait a second, this is still a good idea. This is still the right thing. This is still what people were asking for, but we need to put some sideboards on this. We need some parameters. We need some guidance, and teachers need the tools to use that time effectively. How are we going to divide kids into which room? Where do they go? How are they going to know? Why do the kids even understand why we're doing this? They didn't understand what they were doing either. So it would now be called the WIN, or the What I Need Now, which I think is going on in some of the MCPS schools. In fact, I know my wife does it right now. That was the idea I I didn't create the idea. It's the idea I tried to implement, but without any of the things to go with it, and that didn't work very well. So there was a lesson in there for me as a principal that said, okay, let's get the plan fully in place and then try that rather than have the idea, put the idea in place with no plan. So, thank you.
This is a little bit more of a broad one. So what are your thoughts on the best way forward for our district to ensure students and staff reach their potential?
That is broad. What I know about Missoula from having been around here, and when I dig a little deeper and do some research into what's going on at the schools, there is a lot going on. This district is diversified in every conceivable way, and that's great. It's giving kids opportunities that other kids in other school districts probably won't get. The list of clubs and extracurriculars and all of the things, I mean, from the elementary through the high school level, it's astonishing. And a concern I would have is that what happens when that gets too much? At what point can you not sustain all of those great things? So I think moving forward, it would be a priority for me to make sure that we're able to continue offering these great things that we start, because it's heartbreaking in schools, and it happens all the time, to have a great program or an extracurricular or an activity or an academic enrichment and say, well, that was cool because we had 2 years of grant funding, but now it's over because we can't sustain it. And from a leadership standpoint, that's something that rolls in my head every time one of my staff brings me a wonderful idea. And they say, I've got $500 in seed money. We only need to have this garden for 15 years, and then we'll get that $500. And if we can just sustain it for that long, everything will be great. And I go, okay, let's talk about how do we build this into a sustainable model so that we're not struggling to keep those great ideas and those great services going. So there's a sustainability thing that really comes into my mind with all of those good ideas. And I'm not a no guy. I'm a, okay, how? That's how I approach that is, all right, let's figure out the method to make this good idea something that we can really give a try, and also analyze along the way and say, is it working? Is this what we want? Maybe it's not what we want, and that's okay. I don't mind cutting losses on something that you go, we tried it, it wasn't what we thought it was, so let's put our energy and our efforts elsewhere. I know that this district has some big audacious goals moving forward, and to getting kids to be like globally minded, and that's wonderful. There's not a clear trajectory on how you get there. That's kind of that, you said this was a little more vague, and it is. We can work toward equity and inclusion, but the bigger those goals get, and I mean globally minded in a very serious way, that's a really hard thing to say. Teachers, teach your kids to be globally minded. Work that up. And they'll all say, that's a great idea. How do we do it? What does that look like? What does it sound like? And I'm not sure I know that answer. So that comes back to bringing those stakeholders together. And I know you've got some communities of practice going on right now to try and put some flesh on those bones to say, this is what it might look like to actually implement that. Again, it's a coincidental pleasure to be serving on one of these communities of practice right now with MCPS, and to be listening to what the staff and the people who have been invited to that have to say. And it's astonishing. They're able to do that, but that's not something that a principal or a superintendent or an assistant superintendent or a director can do by his or herself. So really putting the people in place to say, okay, we've got this goal, the board has this direction and this vision. How do we actually implement it in classrooms, in schools? I think on a big picture trajectory, that would be something, that's not an overnight project, but that's something that I'd want to be working for in the long term, to say, how is what we're doing now fitting into that long-term goal?
This is a two-part question.
Ooh.
What has been your experience addressing equity, diversity, and inclusion challenges among students, staff, and buildings? And then as our superintendent, what could we expect from your leadership?
Thanks. So I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't have a heck of a lot of ethnic diversity in the school that I'm in right now. We have some, and to be honest with you, our culture is such that nobody notices. It's not a thing. People are just people in our school, and I don't know that I caused that necessarily. But we do have a lot of other types of diversity because we're not just talking about the color of your skin or your hair or your eyes or where your family is from or where you think your family is from. You look at political diversity and economic diversity, and some of those things are becoming even bigger drivers today as far as diversity factors go than what we used to think of as skin color, and I'm not discounting that at all. But we have found diversity in places that we didn't know it was going to be so impactful. So in my school district, we have, we've got programs that we automatically screen kids if they're a certain socioeconomic status because there's plenty of data that shows they're more likely to have deficiencies. They're not the only kids that have deficiencies when they come into school, but we know that they're more likely to, but we actually screen everybody. We say on federal forms that we're going to make sure we screen these kids under these certain categories for these certain reasons, whether it's because of their background or their socioeconomic status or whatever it is. And the feds say we need to do that, so we do. But we know that it's the right thing to screen all kids to see how we can help any of them who are coming into our district, whether it's as kindergartners. We had a preschool program for a while. So they all got the same treatment, and we respond to them as individuals. We don't respond to them as the kid from the trailer park. We don't respond to them as the kid from the big house on the hill. If they have a need, we address it. And to be really honest, we don't give a lot of credence to all of the other things that are more commonly thought of as the factors that make up diversity, because we're treating kids with what they need, not all the same. That would be equality, but we're treating them with what they need, and that's the equity. So they get what they need based on what they need, not where they're from or what their background is. So that's kind of my approach to equity. And as far as shifting that into what that looks like in this district, I would expect much the same. I think the mechanics of what I just described look a lot different in a district that's much larger, but I think that the foundation of what I described, and that is getting kids what they need where they are, regardless of their background or their circumstance, whether it's great or whether it's abysmal, that's what equity means to me, and to make sure that kids are getting what they need. You can't have a vision of making sure all kids achieve at high levels and have those diverse opportunities if you're not giving kids the things they need to get there. Those things look different, child by child. It's why we look at growth. I know we standardize lots of things, but my biggest focus when I'm looking at data and like with our principals or anyone, frankly, my own children, I look at their growth. Maybe they're at benchmark, maybe they're not above benchmark, because benchmark is a moment in time. Whether kids are growing is what we need to be focused on. And I think most schools these days are, but again, that comes back to that equity piece. And if a kid's not growing, let's find out why and get that child what he or she needs to get there.
Please describe a time when you were confronted with a significant challenge or dilemma. What process did you utilize to create a plan to address the issue?
I may have spilled some beans on this already, just a little bit, but I was given clear marching orders when I became superintendent to find a way to build us a new building. That was a significant dilemma in a community that hadn't done that ever. So I think I may have treaded on this a little bit, but it is the most significant thing that I can describe to you. So again, it comes back to the people in our community needed to understand the why. Why does the school board think that this is of critical importance to our community? Why do they think this is important to kids? One of the problems we had was that the school we were in, 6 buildings on a hillside, we drive by it on Highway 93, which most of you probably have, doesn't look that bad. That's called paint. And we did a great job keeping it painted. But when you come in, which very few people did, unless you were in that school for some reason, i.e. you have a child there, then you start to understand. And it was, so there was one of our biggest barriers. You have something that visually looks, okay, like what's the big deal? And then if you've never been in there, how do you say this is an unsafe school without telling people that their children are not safe in your school today? There's a really fine line there, and I mean that with sincerity. Like, this is not a great situation, and we're doing everything we can to make it the safest situation possible, but it's not good, and it's not sustainable, and it's not long-term. So to kind of get to the answer of your question, we needed to educate our public. And this became less of a value of the school, like I described before with passing a mill levy and people just saying, no, it's a school, the answer is no. This was, what's wrong with the facility and why can't you fix it? Why can't you remodel it? Why can't you just change the carpet? Why can't you just put in an air conditioner? All good questions, and people meant them because they had never set foot in our buildings or on our campus. All they've done is drive by. I can't get the entire community to the school. I found that out. We tried. Open houses, bring people in, come see it for yourself. Nobody came. So we had to push the message, and that's where we had to toe that fine line between sending a message of, here's all the things that are wrong, but it's still okay for your kids to be here for a couple of years. And that's threading a needle. And we were able to do that in a way that people understood, why are my taxes gonna go up $600 if I vote for this? It is not cheap in our little community. And that was a number. I mean, that's a real number for people. And once we were able to paint the picture of, this is the why, this is where we're coming from, these are all of the components that we're trying to be efficient with, this is the longevity of the project, these are some of the things we've done. Part of that project, honestly, was a legislative process. This is one of those behind-the-scene things that I talked about earlier that people don't really know about. We lobbied the legislature prior to our bond to get the bond term limits increased from 20 years to 30 years in the 2019 session. They were calling it the Lolo bill because we had somebody sponsor it. I went and testified several times. People just called it local control, and that's how I described it, and it passed. We're the only school so far to have used that. But what it did was it enabled me to tell our taxpayers, hey, I heard you. This is going to be expensive, and it's not going to get any less expensive in the future. So here's something we did to help reduce that tax burden. We know it's going to be a really expensive building, but people understand a 30-year mortgage because that's what most people buy their house with. So I said, we lobbied the legislature, and they've given us the authority to basically mortgage this for 30 years instead of 20. That reduces your tax bill by 18% for the same building. And yep, you're going to pay a little more interest in the long run, but if you're worried about your annual tax bill, this is what we heard you, right? This is real action, and this is how we solved that piece of the problem. They also said, well, sell the old school to help offset the cost. Okay, challenge number 2. So we worked on that, and we've now sold the existing school facility to a developer, and that money is going directly to offset the cost of the building. So I think where I'm going with this is I heard the community, and the idea was to make sure we got as many of their answers answered before we gave them the question of, do you support this or not? Because if we didn't do that work, how can I ask them to vote yes? We did the work, and they voted yes.
How would you describe an effective working relationship with the Board of Trustees? What would you need from us to support your leadership? And what can we expect from you to support our work?
Well, first, you can expect me to respect your work that you do as the Board of Trustees. I mean, this is a constitutionally vested board that has certain responsibilities to do, and that's your job. So I'm not going to argue with you about that at all. The way I see this largely, there's certain things the board has to do and approve and take action, but this is the visionary group for how the district, how you want to see this district move forward. And you start usually with the superintendent and kind of give the marching orders on what that's to look like. I'm also going to bring ideas to the table to help support that. And to, like I said earlier, start picking off bits and pieces and putting flesh on those big vision statements and those big ideas that you've got with actionable things that we can do at the district and school levels. And I mean, I want to have that mutual understanding that I can bring you these ideas as the Board of Trustees and say, this is what I'd like to share with the principals. Any thoughts on it? Some things will require approval and some won't, but I want to have that open dialogue. I don't work well in a circumstance where there is a surprise between the school board and the superintendent. Like, oh, actually, no, that's completely, I don't want to be so disconnected from a board that the board's got an idea or a vision or a goal or a plan, and it's completely different from me as a leader. That either means that usually means that I haven't done my job, and I haven't experienced that because where I currently work, I make really deliberate actions to connect with my trustees pretty often. Sometimes it's with them as a group on an update, doesn't require any feedback or anything, just want to let you know what's going on. I also just pick up the phone and call my trustees from time to time and let them know if there's something big burbling up, or if I have a big idea that I don't want to bring up necessarily in public, and just kind of, excuse me, take the temperature of, how does this sound to you? Is this something that seems like I should run with it, or am I way off base in the way I'm envisioning this? And I think that's going to happen a lot, especially at the beginning, because I haven't been part of your conversations and the direction you're going. So it would be foolish of me to come in and just do stuff that doesn't make sense. So I think there's going to be a lot of checking until I kind of get into the groove you're in, so that we can work, symbiotically instead of sort of parallel, because that could happen too, but that doesn't seem like it's going to be as effective.
All right, that was question 10, so we're halfway there. We have 30 minutes left, so let's just keep it going a little bit more faster so that make sure we get through all 20 questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Trustee Sherman. Oh, Trustee Wallach.
Told you I was going to cause trouble today. All right, question number 11. How do you believe your current board or staff would describe your effectiveness as a leader, and why?
Not to be coy, but maybe we should ask them. I'm always getting feedback from my staff. So I think that's telling by itself. I'm always taking feedback from my staff. They know that they can give me that feedback, right? I mean, it's intimidating to walk in the superintendent's office, even if I've been there for 16 years and I've kind of hired everybody that's on our staff, almost, not quite, but nearly, and people still come into my office, whether they're tenured folks or people who are doing our crosswalk, and say, you know what, I noticed something. So I think they would describe me as somebody that is approachable. That's not universal. It can't be universal, and I know it's not true because I know there's people who are still afraid to talk to me. But I think overall, I have regular meetings with our union. They come in, they sit in my office at 7:30 in the morning, and we talk about things that are going on, things that are coming up, things they're hearing, so they don't become big things. So I think they would describe me as a listener. They also would, I think my teaching staff knows that I have high expectations, and that when someone's not meeting those expectations, we do everything we can to help them, and if they're not a good fit for us, they're not a good fit for us, and we try to make sure they find a good fit somewhere else. I'm not an axe guy as far as like firing people, but we do, I think they would say I've got a reputation of keeping our standards high, and that benefits everybody. It benefits our staff, and our teachers appreciate that when people are held accountable for what they do or don't do, and I'm okay with that being a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. So I think my staff would also describe me as a little bit brave that way.
How will you handle disagreements when they occur within staff and among trustees? Loaded question, huh?
That is. Well, I'm just thinking of all of the possible examples. So when it's between staff members, if it finally comes to me, and I do everything honestly to give people the decency to not let their interdepartmental or their grade level disputes come all the way to my office, honestly. I try to help them help themselves at the lowest possible level so it doesn't come to me. And it's not so I don't have to deal with it, it's so they don't have to have me deal with it. Because they know, like I said a moment ago, that I can be decisive. And if it's one of those situations where I have to pick the winner, so to speak, I will. And they know that. So I've tried to empower my staff to deal with their problems among themselves, work with their principal if they need to. And if it has to roll up to me, I'll weigh in. And at that point, I'm looking at a couple of things. Is this something I really need to deal with, or do you two just not get along? That's a question. Another part, I said, if I have to make a decision, I say, what's going to be best for kids? Maybe we're arguing about a curriculum choice or something like that. And I love it when teachers get passionate about those things because they're passionate about the right stuff. But sometimes we have to make a decision. So it comes down to what's best for kids. And if I can weigh in and say, you know what, this path, no matter who owns that path, is clearly going to be better for our kids and our school and our district, or maybe their parents in the long run, this is the way I want us to go. Disputes among trustees, I have some experience with that too. And again, I hope that trustees have the professional decency to work out their differences. I also encourage them that it's okay to disagree on things. That happens. It's really nice when everyone's unified, head in the same direction, but it's unrealistic for a group of 11 people to always agree on all the details. Sometimes people will disagree on a recommendation or something because of one specific detail. And that's okay. I've had trustees fuss at me because they say, I just don't like this one piece. Well, it's important and I really can't change that, but they'll vote no on something because of that. Not because they don't like the board or their colleagues or what we're trying to do, it's because of a detail. So I think to dig down into that, it's figuring out where is the actual hang-up, what's really going on, and let's identify it and be okay with disagreeing as long as we can still be colleagues and move forward in this, together in the same direction.
I don't know, but I've heard that the role of a superintendent is complex, with expectations sometimes quite high. As our superintendent, how will you engage in the interested stakeholders while ensuring that our children receive the education they need to succeed?
Your assessment is accurate. It is complex, and I don't know that every day of the week I do the whole job justice. I'm not sure that a person can. It's trying to do that all the time. So, enhanced learning opportunities is one of these big district visions and goals. What it comes down to for me, and to answer this question, is I need to be sure that the right things, the basic education, the foundational education, is going on in all of the schools at all times, in every classroom. Are those kids getting what they need? If they don't have that foundational instruction going on, we can't enhance it with all of the great stuff that we want to add to it. And if that's not going on, I can't in good conscience go to the City Club or to the Rotary or to Kiwanis and give a 5-minute elevator speech on all the great things the schools are doing. So I think making sure and being confident in the fact that all of the right things are going on, those foundational instructional practices are being delivered consistently to every kid, they're getting what they need, and we're enhancing it with X, Y, and Z. Being confident about that is what's going to enable me to say, okay, we've got lots of leadership in place, we got good professionals in place, run with that. You're not on your own forever, but I believe you. You can do it. You're showing it. You're demonstrating it right now. I want to help now take that, and with that confidence in my back pocket, go talk to the other stakeholder groups and bring them in and let them know about the good things that we're doing so that we can say, how do we make it better? And so I guess ensuring that the basic needs are being met for every kid is the foundation of that. And then being able to build on that is what enables me as a leader or as a superintendent to go out and have honest conversations, and rather than kind of a sales pitch conversation with the public, and say, these are the great things we're doing, and here's how you can support us, here's how you can partner with us, here's how you can help our CTE kids get into some trades, get some experience that way, whatever it might be. So that confidence in the schools is what gives me the power to do other kind of district level and community level engagement.
How well have you communicated with district stakeholders in your current role? And please share some examples to support your response and tell us what we can expect from you as our superintendent.
Sure. So I've made a pretty concerted effort to be involved in our community. And that's, I mean, it is Lolo, which is not a great big metropolis, clearly. But there's a lot more activity going on than one might think. So I even actually just before I started as the superintendent, when they had been identified as the future superintendent, I started going to every community council meeting. And that's a panel of 7, and they're elected or appointed by the county commissioners. I mean, it's a real board. And I would every month give a report on the school. And first I was kind of imposing that on them, and then I started to show up on the agenda as in every month, we want to hear from the school and what's going on. And every month, I'm making sure that I'm going there, I'm talking to them. I even made a video when I was going to be gone one time. They played it on the screen. They want to know what's going on in the community. So what ended up happening, and it's not because of the school, but the community council started to get a little more traction than it had had in the past because they got a little more active. They were getting information about the school, but they were also getting information about the community, and they were doing their job. So the attendance started to pick up. So now instead of a panel of 7 who's getting this update from the school, now there's 30 or 50 people in the audience who are also getting information from the school. That's important. But what was really important, and you all know this to be true, it's the 20 minutes after the meeting where people are hanging out, putting away chairs, hanging up tables and that kind of thing, and they come up to you and they say, I want to talk about this. And that's what made me available to them, because they're not going to show up in my office and I'm not worth a phone call. But because I was there, they were able to pull me aside, have that conversation and say, talk to me about this. I had a grandkid that goes there, or whatever it might be. So it was frankly being present. I also made, until this last year, a lot of effort to be part of our booster club and our PTA. Clearly, a superintendent isn't going to go to every PTA meeting that occurs around the city of Missoula, but from time to time, he or she might. Or if they've got a question or if they've got some concerns, I mean, groups of parents have really good ideas and sometimes they get fired up about something, even a good thing. So it might be appropriate for a leader to show up there once in a while. Maybe that's a building principal instead. But I think the answer to the question is it's being present in the community and actually being a face and the voice and the handshake that happens so they know you really exist. And you can expect the same from me. This looks different, right? I don't know that the city council wants a report from the school at every one of their meetings. I don't think that would be appropriate. But you can expect from me to be engaged in all of the possible things that a person can within all the confines of time that we know exist, and to spread the good word about what's going on in Missoula County Public Schools so that we're telling the story. And if we're not telling that story, people make up their own. And then when it's time to make a request or an ask or have a good idea, people already know the story.
Thanks. When hiring key administrative staff, what are the most important qualities that you look for, and how would you go about building a cohesive, high-performing team of district leaders?
I think they've all got to be, I'll answer the last part first, they've all got to be reading the same sheet of music. Leadership can take a lot of different tones and angles and everything. So what's really important to me is that building level folks in particular are student centric. They are the ones that have to drive that. I can say it as the district leader or any other in between, but I know from having been a building level principal and being in the classrooms, in the hallways, working with teachers all day long, that it's those folks that have to be focused on kids. They have to be focused on learners. So that's one of the biggest things I look for when I'm looking for a building level administrator is how are you focused on learners, whether that's in the primary or the middle or even the high school. It's going to look different, but I think the underlying path is the same. How are you focusing on students? How are you going to enhance those opportunities that they have? And what is it that they bring to the table that I don't have that can bring strength to the team? Because I don't claim to be a one-stop shop. I am not. But by building that cohesive team of people that have diverse skills that are all working toward a common goal is how you build a really high-performing team. And that's not just athletics. That goes through corporations and everywhere else. Even people who are focused on the same, if they're not high-performing folks, if they're not focused in the same direction, they're just high-performing by themselves. So it's developing, it's picking people who have the propensity to have that common language, but then actually guiding that conversation so that we can together come up with what are the actionable things that we need to be doing at the elementary, in the middle, and the high school, or maybe district-wide, that can have an impact on kids from a system standpoint. So I guess that's how I would approach looking at the building level administrative team.
So education funding and establishing budget, priorities is an annual exercise and challenge. How will you address our many needs within the reality of financial resources and ultimately ensure that what we value is reflected in our budget?
Yeah, thank you. I can't claim to know your budget, to be frank. I've looked at your TFS for the last couple of years, so I know what kinds of dollars you're looking at, but I haven't had my elbows dirty in this district before, so I don't know exactly what that looks like. It kind of comes back to what I described earlier, though. There's a lot going on. All schools are facing the reality that we've had this influx of extra funding for a while, and there is no hope on the horizon, to be very blunt, that that's going to have any sustenance whatsoever. It's not going to move forward. So a lot of districts, and I don't know where MCPS is like this, but I'm sure I could find out pretty quick, are kind of over-programmed. They're doing more today than they'll be able to do in 18 months' time because the funding for it will dry up. And that's a hard reality. So knowing that, and knowing that that's going to be a tough situation no matter where I am, I would think it would be important to be strategic early so that you're not making hard cuts that are unexpected if that time comes. And you can reprioritize a lot of different kinds of money. You can move, we call it the shell game, we can move money around, but eventually if there's less of it, something has to give. And it's at that point when I would want the stakeholders to say, what are the priorities? And that's the feedback from the board and from the community and from even from the building saying, these are the things that are working really well and that are doing well for kids right now. These are the things that we have to prioritize. Everything can't be a priority. It's a reality. And I'm not glad to, but I'm familiar with having that conversation. So we have to prioritize and figure out what's having the most impact for the most kids and our staff and what's supporting all of those things. So let's do that. And eventually you have to work within your means. You can't run on reserves very long.
Thank you. Number 17, so we still got 3 more to go. How will you navigate the external and internal politics and factors that drive many of the discussions concerning the future of public education? What can our legislators and community leaders expect from you?
They can expect to hear from me. Our legislators already are, and they already do. The future of public education in the state of Montana has not looked so shaky in a long time. It's always a factor. Every 2 years in January, all the school districts in the state kind of get a little tense and go, okay, what's going to happen? How are we going to get out of this? And it's not, I have to remember when I'm advocating for public schools, which I do pretty heavily, that it's not because most people want to dismantle public schools. A few do. Let's be clear about that. And I'll lay down in front of that tank all day long. But how do we work with folks who want to see change so that it's not devastating to public schools and may actually accomplish what the legislators want and what public schools need? It's a fine line. So those internal politics, I talk to people on both sides of the aisle. I've got plenty of contacts that are reds, blues, and somewhere in the purple range. And I work with those folks. I'm heavily involved with my professional organization at the School Administrators of Montana. That keeps me connected to those things in real time. And it also, not only being connected with Sam, but being connected to the development of those priorities and how do public schools across the state need to unite and work together to send a common message so that it's not Missoula fighting this battle and Billings fighting this battle and Helena fighting another. We need to work with our school boards association and the camps outfit and with the teachers union. All of us, as much as possible, need to be singing off the same page, or we're just going to get torn down. So I think bringing as much united voice as possible is really, really powerful, but an individual voice to an individual legislator is probably the most powerful.
How have you balanced the intensity of being a superintendent with your own personal social and emotional well-being?
Ouch. Well, it's okay. I can't say that I do it really, really well. That would taste a lie, and I don't want to say that to you. It's tough, and that's even in a district my size with the things we've got going on. I feel like I get pulled in 15 or 20 different directions, and sometimes I just have to say no. And that was really hard for me, especially as a young superintendent. Early on, I didn't want to say no to anything because I was afraid to lose my job on the second year because I wasn't at the Booster Club meeting 2 months ago. Well, it turns out they're fine. They can deal without me. But I had to kind of do some perspective shifting, but also recognize that there are certain things that I really need to prioritize for the job. And what are those priorities? Sometimes I need to be gone. In fact, I end up being gone quite a bit. So when I have to be gone, I still get to connect with my kids, and I find a way to do that no matter where I am. I got to watch my daughter win our little spelling bee yesterday. I had to prioritize what's going to happen at the end of the school day. Am I going to be in a meeting, or am I going to watch that? Well, I'm really glad that I got to watch that because that was pretty cool. And so it's making those priorities, and also trying, this is a goal, to really value the time when I'm away. And trying to schedule time to be away is tough. It seems like once in a while you create the situation inadvertently where the demands are just so high that people want you all the time. And I try to work with my staff and my team so that they can work. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, our school district goes on. And I think they're in that position. They like to keep me in the loop, but if I'm not there for a few days, it's fine. If there's an emergency, they're fine. So I've worked to try and empower them to be able to run things when I'm gone. And it's working, but it's still something that we need to work on.
If offered this position, what could we expect from you during the first 3 to 6 months that you're with us?
Ooh, you can expect a lot of questions. I mean that with all sincerity. It's going to take me no less than 6 months just to catch up. And that's a scary thing because, to be really blunt, I'm comfortable. I've got a job where I've known this district that I'm in for a long time, and I want to know this district just as well, but it took me a long time to know what I know. So I'm going to be learning a lot. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions. I'm going to be meeting a lot of people to find out how is this operating. And once I figured out how it's operating, then you're going to start hearing me ask a different question, and that's why. Why do we do this? And that's not supposed to be a pointed question as to why are we doing this, but why are we doing this? What's the value? How does this fit with the vision that the district is trying to accomplish? So I think really honestly, there's going to be a lot of things that I need to learn over the first 3 to 6 months about the district and how it's operating, and so we can start to make those plans for if hard decisions have to be made. How are we going to do that? Is this the last question? Did we do this okay? All right. What questions do I have for you? I had some of the same questions for you all that you had for me. So in fact, one of the questions that I brought with me is, what is the board's expectation in the first 6 months? I had 6 months to a year in my brain of their new superintendent. What are you hoping to see right out of the gates?
One of the things I'm looking at is, you talked about it a little, is our budget. We do need to go through our budget, and we actually have a committee meeting coming up, but because we do have those ESSER funds, we have those positions, and we really need to figure that out. Anybody else? Any more questions for us?
No. I'll let it hang.
Great, we did it. 9:04.
You did it. Okay. Thank you all for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tracy. So do you mind if we start a little early? All right, the time is now 9:26, and I just want to welcome you to your interview with the Missoula County Public Schools Board of Trustees. And we'll go ahead and go around and do a quick, a brief introduction of each trustee. And we'll start with Trustee Bullock.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning. My name is Rob Bullock. I've been on the board about a year now, and welcome. Happy to have you.
Thank you.
Keegan Witt, and been on the board about a year.
Cohen Mercer, finishing third year.
Jen Vogel, third year.
Hi, I'm Nancy Hobbins. I'm in my third year on the board.
Hi, Chair Oldperson, she, her, hers, and I'm on my second term.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Culliva, District Council. This is my 28th year.
Ooh, Bia. Yeah, you're.
Arlene Walker Andrews, and I'm at the end of my second year, I guess.
Hi, I'm Grace Decker, she, her pronouns, and I have been here about 8 years.
I'm Jeff Avgaris. I've been here 3 years.
Meg Witcher, she, her, hers, and this is my first term.
Karen Sherman, this is also my first term.
Thank you.
All right. And so we have 20 questions, and each of the trustees will go through and ask the questions. We do have an hour and 15 minutes with you, so I will ask us to move along if we're a little too long, just to make sure that we get through all the 20 questions.
Perfect.
And our counsel is here, so if needed, she will interrupt as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, and so we'll go ahead and start with trustee Wolek.
All right, question number 1. Although we have a general picture of your career based upon your application and video presentation, please take a few minutes to describe your interest in this position and why your skills and experiences make you an excellent fit to become our next superintendent. What has you most excited about this opportunity?
Since we're talking years of experience, this is my 35th year in education. Every year I open up with a staff meeting, and I always tell people this is my 53rd first day of school. So I've been in school since I was 5. And so my interest in this position is, first of all, Missoula, the community. I kind of have two reasons. A personal interest. The personal interest is I recently became a grandpa, and my grandson lives in Polson now. I didn't really think that becoming a godfather or a grandfather would be that big a deal. It's a big deal. I want to try to spend as much time with him as I possibly can. And then the other personal, I have 2 daughters. One daughter is a teacher and coach in Cheney, Washington. And so Cheney would be a lot closer for me to see her. She recently got married a year ago, and hopefully there's some grandkids in that deal too. So the personal part is, being closer to family. The professional part is, after 35 years, I think I've gone through some experiences, and I think I'm ready. And I will welcome the challenge to leading a Class AA school district. Missoula has a great reputation. I've gone through your strategic plan and done my research and looked at, your core values, and those match very similar to what I believe is most important in leading a school district. So I think the biggest thing that I can bring to Missoula County Public Schools is my biggest leadership quality is uniting and building consensus and unifying and building confidence and trust in a school district. I think recently, just coming out of COVID and that kind of thing, public education maybe took quite a few knocks. And I think what I've experienced and what we've gone through in Lewistown, there's more public trust. There's more confidence. People in Lewistown found out when we had to go through COVID that public schools provide something that there's no way we could ever get through. We recently passed a multi-million-dollar bond issue to add on and revitalize 4 different schools, including a 102-year-old junior high and 3 other elementary schools. Our enrollment is up. That bond passed in the very first time. And it was the largest bond in the history of Lewistown, and it was the first bond in 36 years. And it wasn't about the bond that made that happen. It was about a community caring about their kids and realizing that public education is the most important part of that community. And there's several things that kind of built up to that. I think a superintendent should be very visible so that the community knows who that person is and who they represent. Every week I do a radio show. I'll do one tomorrow morning from my phone. It's called Did You Know? And it's broadcasted 3 days a week, and that radio show, and you kind of think, well, nobody listens to the radio anymore. They actually do. And so what that radio show does is highlight all the great things that our kids do. The greatest ambassadors for Missoula County Public Schools is our kids. And so when you put those kids, you know, in your core values, the very first thing you talk about is student-centered. We want to be student-centered in Missoula. And we want to put those kids at the forefront of everything that we do. And so that Did You Know helps kind of bring together that community and talk about all the great things that our kids do. Another thing that it sounds kind of simple, and you're going to probably say like, that can't work in a big town. Yes, it can. It's supposed to be once a month, but I end up doing it like 3 or 4 times a month. I do this coffee with the superintendent. And I just go down to coffee hours. I'm sure there is coffee hours in Missoula all over, Ruby's, Paul's, wherever, it doesn't matter. There's coffee hours out there. And we just talk about stuff, not necessarily school stuff, just stuff, right? And what that does is, again, it binds the community together, it brings them tighter.
Closing statements on this part.
What's that?
Sorry, closing statements on this question.
Okay. The last thing with that coffee and superintendent, they paid for a video that helped pass the bond. Because in their mind, how you get to those retired community people is you put it on the evening news. So they paid for the whole video. Another coffee with the superintendent group, they just bought our shot clocks because they believe in those kids. So my biggest asset, I think, that I bring is I can unite a community and bring everything together to be an advocate for the school system.
Based on your research and knowledge of our system, what do you feel should be the priority work as we head into planning for the next school year?
Well, just like every other place in Montana and probably across the nation, is staffing. This is still a people business, and the better that you have people, especially in the classroom, the better your educational system. I think another thing with Missoula is growth and how you manage that growth to make sure that you can sustain high expectations and that kind of thing. I think the biggest challenge in any school district, but especially in a big school district, is it gets back to what you've already laid the groundwork on with your strategic plan and core values. There has to be a purpose, and that purpose centers around always about us, we. It's not just one person. And so when I look at a purpose, it involves mission, vision, and then those core values. And then every time we come back, we stay very stubborn to adhering to that mission, vision, and core values, because that's our purpose. You have to be able to answer to parents, to students, to staff, everybody, the whole community, why? And in my opinion, that those core values, that purpose, that mission, and that vision, that answers the why. At the center of that, obviously, is students. The most important people in this school district are under 18 years old. Everything centers around them, okay? And if there was anything that we learned from COVID, is what people need people. I mean, kids need other kids need their teachers, and let's face it, teachers need kids. That's why they went into education. So we all need each other, so everything has to surround about that theme of us and we.
How would you describe your leadership style, and how have you leveraged that style to be successful in your previous positions?
I think my leadership style is building consensus, making sure that you listen first and you listen to understand, not to reply or to rebut somebody, but you listen to understand. Especially in a bigger district, you've got a lot of different viewpoints, philosophies, passions that people bring in. So my job as a leader is to take all of those different viewpoints, listen to understand, and then get them to go into that common direction, that common purpose. So I believe that's my biggest thing, is that I'm able to take a lot of different viewpoints, and even viewpoints that I don't necessarily agree with, right? But if I listen to understand and bring those together, it still comes back to what do we do to move Missoula County Public Schools in the positive direction for better learning.
Thank you. How do you approach significant decision-making? What are the important elements that need to be considered when undertaking large-scale change?
I think the first thing when you come to, really difficult decisions is, again, you get multiple viewpoints. I think the best decisions are made with many people. A top-down type, that's not me anyway, a top-down decision-making or strategy doesn't work. You've got to try to involve those people, especially those people that might be closest to that kind of decision. So especially in a large community, it's not just the educational community, but it's also the community at large. And so when you take all those viewpoints together and kind of confide and listen, then I think you come up with a lot better decision knowing that you've heard from a huge gamut of people. And that process, again, you try to come back to that purpose and sort of the why are we deciding to do this, and how is that going to help our kids. It always comes back to what's best for kids. I would say when you approach it that way, it can get messy. Because again, you might have some disagreements, but I think my best asset as a leader is unifying those different viewpoints and getting back to what our true purpose and why we're actually here.
I'm sorry, I'd love to just follow up on that if that's okay, and ask for an example of a time when it got messy and you came out the other side, especially when people really had very different ideas.
I'll go back to COVID. We didn't experience the public distrust or that Missoula, we don't have cops at our board meetings. We don't have attorneys up there, saying that we should shoot the superintendent or anything like that. And a lot of that was building, again, around that community idea. But when it came to COVID, not too many people were very happy about masking. And so when we got that together, there was health officials involved, there were business partners involved, there were school officials, there were parents, that all kind of came together. And the whole idea, I'll be honest with you, we leaned on kids. And another really good asset is I've always chosen to give kids a voice. And I had kids in activities or, that like, hey, Mr. Peck, I don't care if I have to wrap myself in saran wrap. I want to wrestle. Or I want to be at school with my friends. So what we found is it wasn't the kids that had a problem wearing a mask or distancing or going to cohort models or encouraging vaccinations or that kind of thing. It was the adults. So during that whole deal, even though we brought in all those different entities, we leaned on kids. Because if kids can go through those mandates and those requirements that we didn't necessarily agree with, then we can go through them as adults. So that would be one example where you brought in lots of different, controversial things. And again, public education took a huge hit on, CRT and and LGBTQ rights and stuff like that. And again, I'm in a very conservative community. That doesn't matter. Those are our kids. These are Lewistown kids, and we're going to try to do what's right for them. You can have all kinds of different viewpoints and everything, but the bottom line is, how do we educate our kids so that they can be successful in the future?
Thanks, Mr. Peck. Can you tell us about a successful change initiative that you led that made a difference in Lewistown?
You know, everybody will kind of talk again about the bond, how that was a huge thing. Right now, I think all across Montana, we have, it's really hard recruiting and retaining teachers, okay? So we've done several things that we have not experienced. We've filled every single position in my tenure at Lewistown. In fact, we've added counseling positions and educational coaches. We've added positions. And this is all kind of be different change initiatives that basically lead to one thing. It's recruitment and retention of teachers. Last year, we signed a four-year collective bargaining agreement. And it was through the support of the board and the union that we totally revamped our salary matrix. Special ed teachers are very difficult to find. So we extended a contract for all special ed teachers so they actually get paid more than what's actually on their salary matrix, because it's difficult, it's hard. The other thing that we did, especially in special ed, is we have now self-contained classrooms for our very high needs students. And what that did was it helped those high needs kids progress a lot more than they would be, but it also helped our regular ed teachers in that they didn't have such a large spectrum in the regular ed to make sure that they were meeting student needs. And again, in those special ed classrooms, we put emphasis on people. So those classrooms are designed to have small groups of kids, right? There's one certified teacher in there and 2 paras. What we also realized with our special needs program is that paras are absolutely critical in providing that one-on-one personalized learning in a special ed environment. And so now our high needs paras, our one-on-ones, or our paras that are in those CARES classroom, they make $2 more an hour than an instructional para. And what that's done is it's helped build those paras that now I want to be a para and I might want to work in that CARES classroom. So before, it might have been a position that we were having a really hard time recruiting or retaining people. Now we don't. And we've also provided opportunities to kind of grow our own. We have numerous paras. We have 4 right now that were paras normally, and now they're certified teachers, because we've put them in an environment where they want to have that kind of impact on kids. The other thing, again, my older daughter is a teacher in Washington, and how Washington State handled COVID was terrible, absolutely terrible. And what I learned from her, and it was kind of reinforced that I always knew a long time ago, it's not just about teacher salary. It's about teacher conditions and teacher support. So with that 4-year collective bargaining agreement, our teachers and our staff knows that the school board supports them, or they wouldn't have signed a 4-year agreement and totally changed the salary matrix. Our community provides tons of support for our educators. They're thankful that our educators are providing and taking, the greatest asset that Lewistown has is our kids. And parents realize that. So our community and our parents, they support our educators. And when you can show that and demonstrate that, it not only helps with your recruitment, but it helps with your retention. Right?
Closing statement on this question, please.
Okay. Last year, we had one retirement. We had 16 people that could have retired. This year, we have one retirement, and we have 14 people that could retire. They're not going to retire. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're on number 6 out of 20, so I'm just making sure we're on time.
Okay. Thank you.
Conversely, please describe a time when an idea or plan of yours was not successful. What was your response?
I think you always learn way more from screwing up. I mean, that's how you learn, right? But you have to make sure you learn or you fail going forward. So you have to make sure you learn and you're better because of it. As far as a failure, I would say early on we failed kind of as a cost savings measure. We used to have a curriculum director in Lewistown, and kind of this was 4 years ago. And we made some administrative changes and stuff like that, and they were bad changes. We eliminated a curriculum director, and we had to learn. So now I became a lot more involved with curriculum, and my principals became a lot more involved in curriculum, and our teachers became a lot more involved with curriculum. So now we've updated all of our English language arts, our math, our music. We actually stole a lot of our curriculum changes from Missoula in regards to your music curriculum. I'll be honest with you, we stole a lot from Missoula. And so what we did in the beginning is we didn't involve those teachers. We learned from that. Because what really is going to drive curriculum is teachers. So that would be one thing that, again, you have to learn from it and move forward. When you screw up, you remember your mistakes.
Moving on, what are your thoughts on the best way forward for our district to ensure that students and staff reach their potential?
A lot of that, again, goes back to this is what we do, really. I mean, if we're going to put it into a nutshell, what we try to do is put teachers, staff, and kids in a position to be their best. Now, we do that in lots of different ways: curriculum, technology, staffing, teaching conditions, facilities. We try to keep your class size, strategies, interventions, professional development. So all of those go into helping to support teachers and move them forward. A big thing with retention that I think goes unnoticed is principal support. So if we're going to go through a big decision, in my mind, it starts first with the board and that purpose, mission, vision, and core values. And we can always come back to that, right? But then that goes from the board to the administrators, and then the administrators, it goes to the principals, so central office administrators, then to the principals in the schools, and then to the teachers. And that whole purpose, mission, vision, and core values, never changes. Now, the details can be flexible. And so what you try to do is put teachers in a position where they're supported and they can excel. So a lot of that is through evaluations. And it's not an evaluation, but it's a way to improve. So I work really closely with my principals when they evaluate teachers so that it's differentiated. Each teacher is different. And it's always developmental. So how do we grow? How do we get better? And it's always deliberate. So with those teaching conditions and that that specific tile on evaluating and helping kids or helping teachers grow is how teachers go from novice to kind of an apprentice type to where they're becoming proficient, and then you have master teachers. If you can get your teachers to get to that, master level, the effect on kids is amazing. It goes up exponentially, and that's how you get the best growth in learning.
That was you, right? So what has been your experience in addressing equity, diversity, and challenges around inclusion among students or staff, multiple buildings? And as our superintendent, what can we expect from your leadership on those issues?
Man, this is something really close to me. This isn't so much an educational experience answer. This is a life experience answer. From 2nd grade to 5th grade, I went to Browning schools. And one of my best friends is a guy by the name of Alfred Eaglefeathers. It's Chief Earl Oldperson's grandson. I was the only white kid in my elementary school, Vina Chatton. And when I say I grew up in Browning, Montana, I literally grew up in Browning, Montana. The values, the compassion, the empathy that I learned being a minority in a Native American culture that I highly, highly respect to this day, taught me so much about inclusion and being a minority and acceptance, because I had to experience prejudice or bias against my friends just because of the color of their skin. And that is something as a white kid in Montana that doesn't always get to learn. So that experience in Browning was literally life-changing. And then I was a superintendent. I married a lady that's enrolled in the Rocky Boy Reservation. She's Chippewa Cree. This morning I smudged because I've learned that the values that culture ingrains, they're much more kinder and tolerant and less biased than any other culture that I've been involved with. They've taught me a lot. So now when I'm in Missoula County or in Lewistown, Montana, I understand what it's like to be a minority. I understand what it's like to be secluded. I understand what it's like to not necessarily be accepted. The best part about different cultures is they make us all better. That's how we learn empathy. It's from different cultures. And when you learn different viewpoints and different beliefs and values, it makes you better because you understand now a different point of view. So the best part about being culturally diverse is it makes us all better. It makes us all more empathetic. I think right now, our schools need to teach that more than ever at this time. That is such a big deal, right? And again, that's not coming from as an educator. That's coming as a person that lived through those experiences.
So what impact does that have, like in terms of the systems or the structures or the programs or the ways that you've brought that into the work?
It's all about inclusion. It's all about including everybody. And it doesn't matter what your race, religion, your sexual orientation, your creed, your political beliefs, that all doesn't matter. It's all about including all of those people and valuing those people. When I was in Box Elder, probably 2 or 3 times a week, I would get on the intercom, and we stole this saying from the book or the movie The Help. But we would always say, you know, we'd get on the intercom, announce it to the whole school, every teacher, every kid, everything. You are smart, you are kind, you are important. And I still have kids that, you know, they're in college and they'll come up to me and they'll say that to me. You are smart, you are kind, you are important, right? And again, it's about including all that as a human, as a school, and as a community, not whether you're Native American or you're Christian or you're, you know, LGBTQ or not. It's you're a part of this community, and you are smart, you're kind, and you're important. I remember I had a kid that would come up to me and say, you know, why do you always tell us that? Why are you always doing that? Why do you always tell us that? And this is the best part about kids. And then that'll go across to adults. Trust me, kids will lead the way. We tell you that because we want to tell you that enough so that you start to believe it. And it's true. If you act in ways that include those people and you don't have any of those biases or seclusion or anything like that, people start to believe it. You just have to keep reinforcing it.
Thank you. This one you may have answered already, so feel free to be concise if you choose. Please describe a time when you were confronted with a significant challenge or dilemma. What process did you utilize to create a plan to address the issue?
Yeah, I kind of, you know, it's gathering people that are closest to that kind of decision, and then strategizing to make sure that you listen to understand to all those viewpoints, and then make sure everybody listens, and then you put the best things forward in the best interest of kids. Again, at the center of those are kids. Man, it happens like every day, whether it's a policy change or intervention or a strategy or, you know, how do we staff this area or that area? You know, how can we be, you know, how can we get the community behind this so that they believe in it? You know, it happens in like all kinds of different areas. And the point is, you just got to come back to that purpose, and you got to stay firm to that process and staying within the you know, the framework so that you're getting all the viewpoints to make the best decisions. One of the great attractions to coming to a AA school district is you have a lot of resources that you can bring together to come up with the best decisions. Sometimes when you're in smaller school districts, it's just you. But in a larger district, you have so many resources and so many different viewpoints that you can bring together to come up with the best decisions.
How would you describe an effective working relationship with the Board of Trustees? What would you need from us to support your leadership, and what can we expect from you to support our work?
Great question. Well, first of all, when you're introducing yourself, this is a young board. You know, so a lot of you are just getting into this. So a lot of it, first of all, you set policy. Okay, that's the big thing. And that gets back to, again, the mission and vision part, right? And those core values. And when I look at your strategic plan and I look at your core values and those kind of things, maybe not you directly right now on the board, but previous boards, you've done a really good job, okay? So that gives me sort of my marching orders. My marching orders is to follow and try to manage and lead so that we follow your vision, mission, and core values. The best board members are ones that, first of all, are advocates of public education. They're advocates of kids. And they're advocates for creating a school system that prepares our kids to lead, not necessarily to get into a certain college or to get a certain job, but to lead a life with purpose and to lead a life worth living. It goes a lot deeper than that. And so you set that mission and vision, and then your love of the community and your kids is not like one little thing. Like you don't have an axe to grind, or you don't have one thing that you ran for the board to try and change or rectify or that kind of thing, but that you realize that you're one body with a single voice, and you work together as a team. So our relationship is one again. It's us. It's we. I try to make you better and you make me better. And so the best board members are the ones that sort of have that 30,000 viewpoint more so, and that you hold me accountable to following that mission, vision, and core values. And then it's up to me to get that down to the school system staff and administrators and teachers, and then ultimately the kids. There are a lot of legal things, because you are a public entity and you are accountable to the community. So you're very visible. We have to be very transparent. There's no backdoor stuff. We have to kind of get away with that, right? So with me being visible in the community and this kind of, just even this format, I'm probably biased. I think one of your biggest jobs is to hire a superintendent. Because, again, we're on the same team. We have to work together, and we have to be accountable to the community and the staff. So those kind of characteristics, that sort of boardsmanship, where you're thinking from that 30,000 viewpoint, no axes to grind, that you work as one body as a whole, and we together as a team, is really important as far as that board functioning.
How do you believe your current board or staff would describe your effectiveness as a leader, and why?
I think, again, I think we're very proud of our school system and our kids. I think there was a lot of different factions and maybe some divisiveness. And I think now what people see is a much more united community. It's easier, I think, in Lewistown. I remember when I first went to Lewistown, they asked me, like, man, why are you going to Lewistown? You're 2 hours from anything. And what it did and what it taught me, and I still believe that this can go into any community, is we depend on each other in Lewistown. When I was an administrator in Hamilton, I probably came to Missoula 3 or 4 times a week. We were a bed yard to Missoula, right? In Lewistown, we can't just run to Billings, and we just can't run to Great Falls. It's 2 hours away, right? So what that did was it brought us together. We're dependent on each other. We're much tighter knit. And what COVID did, again, is we realized people need people. People need people in Missoula, too. And this school district can be that unifying force, that cohesive force that brings the community together. I've seen that in Lewistown, and I totally am confident that we can do that here in Lewistown, or in Missoula, excuse me. So I think that's the biggest thing that they would probably say about me, is that, he brought us all together for a common force and always trying to do what's best for kids. It's those little things, like I said, the Did You Know radio and the coffee with the superintendent. It's being visible at every music concert or every, activity, game, or event. It's being involved with Kiwanis or Rotary or, I'm in a bowling league, for goodness sake. And my bowling partner is the guy that delivers the school breakfasts and lunches. And you think, wow, big deal. But bowlers are part of the community too. And you've got to be that visible person that's representing the district in a positive way.
All right, question number 12. How will you handle disagreements when they occur within staff and among trustees?
Go to them directly. You got to work it out. You got to, again, you're all on the same team. And there might be disagreements. Again, you learn the best actually by going through obstacles and difficult times. Sometimes there's disagreements that you had no idea that there was a disagreement. And so when you bring people together to try to address that disagreement, again, you got to stay that course. You got to always come back to that purpose. Then I think you work that disagreement out. And sometimes I think that it's not always a disagreement. It's a different way of looking at something, but it's not necessarily a disagreement. And no matter what, you always, no matter who the person is, right, you always respect their dignity and their respect because they earn that. And so when I say it's not always a disagreement, it's because you find out that we're actually not disagreeing it. We're just interpreting it different ways. But then when you get them together and take care of that disagreement, then you find out, like, actually, we're on the same page here. We got this.
Okay, the role of a superintendent is complex, with expectations sometimes quite high. As our superintendent, how will you engage the interested stakeholders while ensuring that our children receive the education they need to succeed?
Kind of answered this, yeah. I don't want to be redundant, but again, it's about bringing people together for that common purpose of doing what's best for kids. And again, the diversity of Missoula and the different viewpoints and all the different, perspectives out there, that's a good thing. That's never something that I should ever shy away from as a superintendent, because all those different viewpoints and attitudes or opinions are what's going to make us better. But it always gets back to, what's best for our kids. Let me just kind of address something that we're going through right now. It's kind of weird, but the school calendar is always a controversial thing among staff and community. You kind of think, really, like, come on, So that would be one example. We have a lot of disagreements on that. And so, like, when we meet with the calendar committee, we always have to come back to that purpose and what's best for kids. So there's a lot of teachers that, like, they enjoy, there's a lot of elementary teachers, they love the weather in Montana in August, so they don't want to start early, right? High school teachers, got a lot of coaches and stuff like that. We're starting fall sports in the middle of August, so they want to come back early, right? A lot of people, well, we want a spring break, we want this, that kind of thing. So what you try to do is, you listen to all those viewpoints and all those things, and then you get back to, like, okay, what's best for kids? So, like, especially for younger kids, you don't want long breaks. You don't want long breaks, right? So your Thanksgiving or Christmas breaks or spring breaks and stuff like that, you don't want them real long, right? And our most vulnerable, or probably maybe our highest needs kids, they depend on school. You don't want them out of school because that's probably the most consistent thing in their life. So when you bring those calendar people back together and they're like, okay, you're right. Again, our higher purpose is what's best for kids.
How well have you communicated with district stakeholders in your previous role? Please share some examples to support your response and tell us what we can expect from you as our superintendent.
Yeah, same theme here. You got to involve them all. But it's still going to come back to that common purpose and everything. You know, I've talked about the radio show, Did You Know? When I go on that, when I call in tomorrow for my radio show, it's going to highlight kids. Okay, it's going to highlight our I Love to Read Month activities. It's going to highlight, last week we did a kindness challenge in all of our deals. It's going to highlight our student mentorship programs. It's going to highlight, we had 3 state champions in the state speech and debate tournament last week. It's always going to highlight kids. And what I have found is all the stakeholders can always rally around kids. And part of our job as school board members, and as a superintendent especially, is to be that advocate for kids. So that you unite all that, and again, it could be bowling night where you're bragging about our kids. It could be, you know, Hellgate girls are going to play Helena Capel tonight. It could be going to a Grizz game and you're wearing Missoula County Public School gear. You've got to be that visible, and you have to be that advocate to bring in all the stakeholders to support the school system.
When hiring key administrative staff, what are the most important traits that you seek? And how will you build a cohesive and high-performing team of district leaders?
Well, I know you're hiring a Sentinel principal right now, and you're hiring a superintendent, and there's been a lot of, you know, changes and stuff like that, especially in upper level administration. So the biggest thing is that they're willing to work really hard. They understand. I mean, I hate to keep harping on that, but it always comes back to that purpose and those core values and vision and mission. It sort of gives the why. So when I'm hiring an administrator or, you know, a principal or something like that, I always want to find out what their why is. And if their philosophies and their values reflect what's in that purpose. There's a lot of qualified people out there that have great intentions, but there's not always a great fit for Missoula County Public Schools. So when I'm trying to find that administrator or upper central office or a leader, I'm trying to find that best fit for the community and that purpose. And the questioning or their questions back to me can basically indicate that. When it comes to principals too, I mean, you have a lot of different, you know, Jeanette Rankin Elementary School is different than Charlo, Chief Charlo. It's a different community as far as staff, but also as far as parents and kids. And so you got to try and find that best fit for that particular school or school community.
Education funding and establishing budget priorities is an annual exercise and challenge. How will you address our many needs within the reality of financial resources that we have, and ultimately ensure that what we value is reflected in our budget?
Yeah, so when I look at your, you know, strategic plan and that kind of thing, it's people. if we're gonna improve, the budget should reflect a priority on the classroom. So, you know, I've looked at a lot of AA school districts. What's scary about AA school districts is they do, when they put their budget together, they prioritize staff, people. So I would ask, you know, typically a AA budget, over 90% of that is in staff. It's people and benefits, right? From a smaller school perspective, that's kind of scary. Because if we do have to cut, or we do have to, tighten our belts and stuff like that, that's probably going to come in people. And that, to me, is scary, because what makes this such a good school district is people. So your budget is right on because it's prioritized people. So when I look at your budget and we go through different exercises, I'm not necessarily going to go to the biggest pot, because that's the people. I'm going to look at other places where we possibly could save. One of the ways we've actually saved money in Lewistown is in our infrastructure in our buildings. So we went through a huge LED replacement that was long-term, that paid for itself, and now we're saving money within 2 years. We totally revamped in all of our schools, and we used some COVID money for this, but we totally changed, and we became much more efficient with our boilers and our variable pumps and our HVAC systems, where we invested money early on. But then Northwest Energy was providing a bunch of rebates, so that actually in the long term, now we're saving money. And it's much healthier and more efficient systems. Another way, again, I'm trying to stay away from the classroom, and I'm trying to stay away from people. With this building bond, we have a central kitchen that was in the central office, where I work. So every day, we have a guy, my bowling partner, that delivers 5 breakfasts to 5 different schools, and then comes back, gets the mail, and then delivers 5 lunches to 5 different schools from a central kitchen. Extremely inefficient. So when we ran the bond, the central kitchen now is part of a school. So they don't have to transport now to that school. So that just saves us 20% in transportation costs. It's much bigger now, so now we can buy in bulk, so we save money because we have way more dry storage and freezer space to buy more in bulk, which saves us money. That's a long-term change that's going to save the district more and more and more money, so that we can invest in our people and the classroom. One concern that a lot of districts, when you're starting to develop budget, is there a COVID cliff? So when this COVID money runs out, are we gonna so maybe those counselors that we needed to help our emotional and mental health of our students and staff, is that gonna go away? We don't wanna have a COVID cliff. So you wanna be able to budget so that it's long-term and sustainable. I'm sure there's a lot of people, maybe even staff, that are going to look at this office right here.
Closing statements on this question.
Are we overloaded in administrative costs? And that's where you get back to, when I evaluate administrators or central office staff, I have to be real, my feedback and my growth or development has to be real purposeful. Because it could be a budget thing, and we're taking our money away from the classroom and our people.
Thank you. So we're on question 17. We're almost there. Just watching the clock. How will you navigate the external and internal politics and factors that drive many of the discussions concerning the future of public education? What can our legislators and community leaders expect from you?
they can expect that I'm going to be an advocate for public education, and especially public education in Missoula. You know, this is a university town. This school district has pull with that legislature. You know, right now there's an open enrollment bill that's a big deal in Lewistown, Montana, that could affect Missoula County, probably in a positive way, but it can cause some, you know, headaches also because of growth. It's being sort of marketed as a school choice or parental rights bill. I don't see it that way. And all the educational lobbyists support this bill because I think it would help a bigger school district like Missoula. So what that does is, you know, I experienced this in Lewistown. We have more kids that come into the Lewistown School District because of our AP classes, our dual credit classes, our music programs, our CTE programs, those kinds of things. Whereas in those smaller surrounding schools, they don't have those. So how that's going to affect, I think, a Missoula, an open enrollment deal, is it's going to create growth issues for us. Because I think we're going to see more schools, and again, the more success we have, the more parents and stuff like that want their kids to experience those same successes and same opportunities. So that's going to be a growth management for us. I think again, public education, especially in the political realm, is sort of taking some knocks. I look at this as a parent. Between August and May, my kids, your kids, will spend more time with teachers, coaches, school personnel than they will with you. They're spending up to, 7, 8, 9 hours. You throw bus trips on that, all that, could be 10 hours a day. Different activities, all that. If that isn't a reason to put our trust in our educators, there's no other reason. And if you look at all the data, people trust our teachers more than legislators, politicians, government workers, small business. They trust our teachers more than anybody. So if that isn't a reason to be a public education advocate, I don't know what else there is.
This is a more personal question. How have you balanced the intensity of the position with your own social and emotional well-being?
I think, first of all, I believe that somebody that goes into education has a tremendous impact. Education to me is very personal. My mom and dad were both teachers. I have 4 older sisters. They were teachers. Full disclosure, the principal at CS Porter, Ty Solberg, is my nephew. I have a daughter. My oldest daughter is a teacher in Cheney, Washington. But when I was in Big Frog, I went through a divorce, okay? And every divorce is brutal, right? And if it wasn't for the teachers and coaches that had my kids, I don't think they would have turned out as well, and I don't think I would have turned out as well. So I owe a huge gratitude personally to educators, not just my family, but the people that I work with or that worked with my kids. And I think as a superintendent, you got to be kind of tough-skinned a little bit because you're going to, take some grief and everything. But I truly believe what is best for me emotionally and mentally is watching kids succeed. That makes me feel good emotionally. So there's a reason why I go to every music concert or go to every game or activity, or I try to get into at least a school at least once a day. And I know that would be way more difficult, but I would still do that. I mean, my biggest worry about coming to a bigger school district is that I lose contact with kids. And I am not going to do that no matter where I go. I'm still going to be in those schools. I'm still going to go to all those events. I still want to be around kids because mentally and emotionally, that's what makes me healthy.
Thanks. So if you were to be offered this position, what would we expect from you in the first 3 to 6 months that you would be on the job?
Listen. Go to all those stakeholders, get all those, the very first thing I would do is, as a board, I would go to you, and again, I'd go back to the strategic plan and core values and mission and vision, but then I would ask you personally, because some of you are, first year and stuff like that, but I would ask you personally and put it together, what's your vision of Missoula County Public Schools? And I would literally ask you personally, not as a board necessarily, but ask you personally, what's your vision? The next thing I would ask you is what? What are the biggest priorities, the biggest, most pertinent things, the most impactful things that I would need to address right away? So I would go to you. Then I would ask you, who? So as representatives of the school board and for your community and constituents, right, you were voted into this office. Who do I need to talk to? So I would ask you, every community kind of has main players, big players, right? So I would ask you, each one of you as a board member, and we would do this as a group, and I would ask you, okay, who do I need to make contact with? Who do I need to make sure that's in my circle? Who do I need to seek out advice from? And who are going to be sort of the movers and shakers to move this district forward? And then the last part is putting all that together. I'm missing one here. And then it always gets back to this, but I guess if I would ask all those stakeholders, when you told me the who, I would ask, what are our biggest strengths? What are our biggest challenges? And so that kind of gives me sort of a North Star. It sort of gives me a lot of direction, especially in those first 3 to 6 months. And then the next part in that 3 to 6 months, besides listening, like not giving my opinion, right? This is where I'm asking the questions. I'm asking way more questions than I'm answering, right? And so then I listen, and then basically I bring that back, and that sort of gives me the North Star of how to go through. I have a problem, I'll admit this. Sometimes I am not very patient. So you put that in a 3 or 6 month, depending on how that goes, it's probably going to get me excited about certain things. And so I'm going to probably want to okay, we got to start doing this, you guys. Let's go. Come on, we got to get after this, right? I'm not always going to wait, for 6 months or a year or whatever, when I probably, to be honest with you, I should. And then I, instead of getting back to, me sort of talking, it should be back to more listening. And then I got to kind of slow myself down. But that would be the next steps in the 3 to 6 months.
And your final question is a question from you. So do you have questions for us?
Yeah, I do. You read newspapers, and you can't always trust a Missoulian, but you read. He's over. Yeah, can't always trust a Missoulian. No, I'm just kidding you. But you read. First of all, that's a big entity. You want to make sure you know, the Missoulians behind us, because they have a big influence. Just like radio stations and the University of Montana and stuff like that. You want to make sure they're on our team, right? But second, when I look at issues involving Missoula, you know, schedules, I know you just got through that, right? And we're staying with the same schedules. You know, I think coming in as a superintendent, you need to know this as a board. I'm not going to come in here and change a whole bunch of stuff, right? You've been to that rodeo before, and there's a lot of great things that are going on currently in Missoula, okay? My job as a leader is not necessarily to be the most educated, to be the most, you know, the smartest, the most certified, the most experienced. You know, my job is to try to make everybody around me better. So when I look at issues, you know, schedules, the boundaries seem, especially when the community is growing, those boundaries for those elementary schools and middle schools, you know, how is that a big issue? Is that something that we need to look at right away? How is that, you know, how's the community reflecting on that? When I looked at, you know, all the community input that went into the superintendent position, it sort of seemed like there was a real vocal group about, you know, Sealy Swan High School, how they sort of seem left out. You know, they're not necessarily included. How is that affecting the district and the community's perspective of what we're providing as an educational system? Years ago, you know, I know Hellgate Elementary School District is growing. And there was a big push for maybe that school district to build another high school. So if I were to ask you as a board, what are the most pertinent, most impactful issues that you think that I need to deal with right away in that 3 to 6 months?
Any board member want to answer? Go ahead, Trustee Decker.
I think you alluded to something that's impacting every school district currently, which is what to do about the end of the ESSER era funding. There are obviously here new positions and new programs that have started. And maintaining those may in fact be a priority, even if they were started with that funding. So looking really at the entire set of what we do and determining which of those things are most important to continue, maintain, even if they didn't exist before, is going to be a challenging conversation to have. So that's certainly a priority, and one that the deadline isn't up to us,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So
Yeah,
that's going to be an issue for every school district for sure. And then the ongoing challenges around equity between schools, equity between populations, and around building a school district where every child can find their place, and where staff feel and are well supported, both financially and like emotionally. I would say those are, from my perspective and a lot of the conversations we've had, those are the things that are most pressing.
Good.
For me, it's probably at this point in time trying to figure out how schools and school districts can refine policies to meet demands that are being passed at the legislature without changing what we think is terribly important.
Can you be like more specific about that?
Well, as we discuss things like equity and curriculum, how do you deal with issues such as a bill that says from now on, schools must teach scientific fact, not scientific theory? And how do you explain, for example, this is my own bias, but what scientific theory really means, rather than assuming that it's equivalent to a hunch? So how do you talk to legislators and then deal with whatever comes down the pike in a reasonable and transparent and useful way.
So I would say you named 5 or 6 issues yourself. You heard from 2 of our board members that have 2 other issues. I think the first 3 to 6 months, 12 months, maybe even 24 months is everybody's going to have an issue they're passionate about. And this is a big school district, a lot of buildings, a lot of principals, staff. We have unions, plural. We have 11 board members. So as a superintendent, it's the biggest challenge, in my very humble opinion, is how do you prioritize? What is important? And for the stuff that you don't prioritize, how do you tell those people that it's not a priority? I mean, I would say that all those are a priority, and you're going to hear more priorities. It's going to be overwhelming. This is a monstrous job. It's a big job, and you're following some really good superintendents that inspire the people around them and tackle these issues. And even though they're not maybe completely solved, have made progress in most areas. So I think a more broad answer that I would give you is we could probably sit here for the rest of the day talking about all the issues you're going to have to tackle in MCPS.
Yep, yep.
I do see, coming out of, one is making sure that staff and our teachers are supported in a way and that we are getting employees that are needed to fill positions is a big priority. And then behavioral mental health in classrooms and within our schools, and the mental health of not only our amazing children, but the amazing adults who are with them every day, and trying to tackle that with a reduction of ESSER funding.
All right. Comes to a close, and I want to thank you for being here and being interviewed by us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll do a brief introduction of the trustees here, and then we have 20 questions that we're going to go through, so I'll make sure to keep us on time. Each of the trustees will go through it, and I will interrupt if we need to move on from that question, and our counsel is here as well, and she will interrupt if needed too.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and start down here with Trustee Wallach.
Morning, my name is Rob Wolick. I've been a trustee for about a year now, and thanks for coming and interviewing. We appreciate it. Happy to have you here.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Keegan Witt, and I've been a trustee for about a year.
Cone Mercer, about 3.
Jen Vogel, about 3 years.
I am Vice Chair Nancy Hobbins. I've been here for about 3 years, too.
Chair Willina Oldperson, she, her, hers, and I'm on my second term.
Arlene Walker Andrews, and I've about 2 years.
That's okay, no, I'm Elizabeth Culliver, I'm the district council, I've been here a long time.
Hi, I'm Grace Decker, and she, her, and I have been a trustee for about 8 years.
Jeff Avgaris, and I've been a trustee for 3 years.
Hi, I'm Meg Witcher, she, her, hers, and this is my first trustee round.
Okay.
Good morning, sorry.
Hi, I'm Karen Sherman, and this is my first term as a trustee.
Nice to meet you.
Trustee Sherman, do you want to start?
I will, thank you. Although we have a general picture of your, please.
Did I know?
Although we have a general picture of your career based on your application and video presentation, please take a few minutes to describe your interest in this position, why your skills and experience will make you an excellent fit to become our next superintendent. What has you the most excited about this opportunity?
I'm Candace Roush. I appreciate the opportunity to come in today. I love public education. I love children. I have a strong passion for teaching. I think I'm still a teacher at heart. No matter what position I'm in, I find myself mentoring and teaching others. And I think that this is an opportunity for me to give back to my local community as well. I have 2 children here in the school system, so it's an opportunity for me to help come in and, if you so choose, help lead the school and do great things for the kids here in Missoula. You're welcome.
I'm breaking in for just a minute because I just wanted clarification of one thing about your credentials, because I wasn't sure I read them correctly. At one place, I thought it was an EDD, and in another place, a PhD. Now, maybe you have both, but I just didn't know.
I have an EDD and an EDS.
Just
Based on your research and knowledge of our system, what do you feel should be the priority work as we head into planning for the next school year?
Well, I have been able to read through, I believe it was 114 pages of comments from the great survey that was just done. And I know that there's a growing need for special education services because the population is growing. So I think that, could you repeat the question real quick? I want to make sure I'm on the right track.
Sure. Based on your research and knowledge of our system, what do you feel should be the priority work as we head into planning for the next school year?
Yes, I wanted to make sure I was on the right track. But yes, I do think focusing on special education as well as progressing at the high school toward more dual credit opportunities, potentially having our students graduate with associate's degrees, just really focusing on connecting with our community and our partnerships, industry certifications. I really feel that those are priorities close to my heart.
Excellent. How would you describe your leadership style, and how have you leveraged that style to be successful in previous positions?
I think I'm a servant leader at heart. If there's a job to be done, I'm the first to jump in and volunteer. Just a couple weeks ago, I was volunteering to take tickets at a Sentinel High School basketball game. So I think if there's work to be done, I'm one of the first ones to jump in. And I think that shows, as far as leadership styles, that sets a good example of being a servant leader. I do believe people need leadership. They need goals. We have a lot of amazing staff here, and I think they want leadership. They want a direction. They want goals and objectives set, and someone to help, blaze that trail for them.
Thanks. So how do you approach significant decisions and decision-making? What are the important elements that you need to consider when you're undertaking especially a large kind of change?
I think it depends on the decision and how big it is and how many people it will impact. I find that the larger the decision, the more input you will need. Smaller decisions, smaller input, but if it's going to impact a lot of people, I think we need input, from discussion with the associations to meeting with your staff. I love that Missoula does a great job of surveying, communicating with parents, community members, capable of making decisions, but I believe in having, if it's going to impact a lot of people, there should be a lot of input given.
Could you please talk about a successful change initiative you've led that made a difference in your prior district?
Sure. I was able to partner with 2 other school districts, and we received close to $1 million grant, and it helped us to combine resources and staff. We're able to share teachers among the 3 corporations, some of them virtually, where students can virtually Zoom in to classes at other schools that may not be provided at one school. We were able to provide digital fabrication labs in our elementary school through the collaboration. I think pulling our resources together, we were able to provide more for our students, more career focus at the middle school level, just getting them ready and focused on understanding what careers are available so that they can pick classes that are relevant to them in high school. That's one of my most successful endeavors, I think.
Thank you. Conversely, please describe a time when an idea or plan of yours was not successful. What was your response?
It's along the same lines. Our first proposal for that close to $1 million grant was denied. They did give us a $10,000 startup, and so it was a little disappointing because we put almost an entire year's worth of work, research, community gathering. We actually have all 3 school boards meet together for a big, giant school board meeting. So we put a lot of time and effort into it, and the first original application was denied. I think because it was new, groundbreaking. They had never seen anything like that before, but they did give us a $10,000 startup and wanted to see what we could do with that. And so we just took it and ran with it, and ended up coming back the next year, and our proposal was accepted. So.
Hi, what are your thoughts on the best way to move forward for our district to ensure that our students and staff reach their full potential? Kind of a broader question.
Broader question. I think that comes down to goal setting. What vision do we set? What goals and objectives are we setting, and how are we meeting those goals? I think a lot of input into that. I would love to have board input into something like that. But I think leadership in general is about giving feedback and making sure that we're talking to people and making sure that we are progressing toward those goals through feedback.
What has been your experience addressing equity, diversity, and inclusion challenges among students, staff, and buildings? And then, as our superintendent, what could we expect from your leadership?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I come from a district with high poverty, a large high poverty rate. I believe we were close to 65% poverty rate. And I think that's something that you have to know and you have to understand. And it comes with a lot more love, a lot more compassion, a lot more understanding. You may have parents working 2 or 3 jobs just to be able to provide for their children. So they may not have the time to put in extra academic work with them in the evenings. So I think teachers have to work twice as hard. But I think just knowing that and having compassion and love and providing resources where we see the need the most.
Please describe a time when you were confronted with a significant challenge or dilemma. What process did you utilize to create a plan to address the issue?
I think when it comes to the collaboration between the other schools that we were proposing, it was an unknown to a lot of our staff. What is this going to look like? How is it going to work? So I'm a big believer in brainstorming sessions. I think you can solve a lot of issues when you bring the right people together and you brainstorm and you lay out a blueprint and you're very transparent and communication. And I think it eased a lot of the fears, just putting together a solid plan and being transparent with everyone and being excited. I think your excitement goes a long way. When you're leading a school, people tend to follow the excitement of the leader. So I think that's an example of a time when there was a lot of unknown and a lot of scariness, and we helped comfort them with a solid plan and a lot of excitement.
How would you describe an effective working relationship with the Board of Trustees? What would you need from us to support your leadership, and what can we expect from you to support our work?
It's a great question. I've always had a great relationship with my school board, always. I've never not had a great relationship with a board member, and I think a lot of that is just the relationship building, the communication that comes with it. And so I would hope that there would be a similar situation here. That was one of my questions for the board, actually, was how has that relationship been in the past? And the support that goes along with that. I think trusting the superintendent that we're pulling the right people together, the right resources together to make decisions that are best for the students, not necessarily best for one cause or another, but making decisions that are best for all of the students.
All right, halfway done. Question number 11. How do you believe your current board or staff would describe your effectiveness as a leader, and why?
My current, well, I left Indiana as a superintendent. I was offered a 3-year contract extension before I left, and I've actually since been sought after leaving from other local school systems wanting me to come be their superintendent. So I think I have a great relationship with the board in that fact. And can you repeat the question one more time? I'm sorry.
Sure. How do you believe your current board or staff would describe your effectiveness as a leader, and why? And I know you don't have a current one right now, but
Sure.
the most recent.
I've had highly effective evaluations as a superintendent. I really stay in tune with my board, and I want to know, like, how can I be the best? What can we do to make our school the best? How can we celebrate our successes? How can we improve our challenges?
How will you handle disagreements when they occur within staff or among trustees?
I think there's always common ground somewhere. I think if we could try to find that one piece of common ground and build upon that, tough decisions have to be made, but I think if we can make them with kindness and compassion, there's a lot of flexibility, I think, that comes with that.
The role of a superintendent is complex, with expectations sometimes quite high. As our superintendent, how will you engage the interesting stakeholders while ensuring that our children receive the education they need to succeed?
I'm not new to meeting with stakeholders. I think having an open door policy, being available to community, being visible, going to events, making sure that it's known that you have an open door, that you're willing to talk about issues and discussions, and just making sure that people feel comfortable coming to you and talking to you. I think that helps with a lot of confidence.
How well have you communicated with district stakeholders in your previous role? I know you're not in a district right now. Please share some examples to support your response. Tell us what you can expect, what we can expect from you as our superintendent.
Can you repeat the very first part of that?
Sure, yeah, it's a little tricky because you're not in a district right now, but how well have you communicated with district stakeholders in your previous role?
Okay.
In your previous jobs, how have you communicated?
Being out and about is a great way to meet the stakeholders. Calling up and setting up meetings with, your local legislators, even, something small as taking cookies to your local EMT for showing up for a fire drill, little things like that really go a long way with bridging the gap between the school and the outside community.
So when looking at hiring key administrative staff, what are the most important traits that you would look for, and how would you go about building a cohesive and high-performing team of leaders?
Being a team player, I believe, is top priority to me. Willing to do any job necessary. I tell my staff that every year. I'm not too good to clean toilets. I said this earlier to the staff. I'm not too good to cook in the cafeteria or to drive an activities bus if a student group can't go without a driver. I think it's just willing to jump in and do any job necessary to be a team player. And then I think it comes back to also brainstorming sessions. Can we bring our high school principals together for brainstorming sessions on how we can better partner and collaborate together?
Guys, can you Just, can you talk about hiring? Not part of the question.
As far as what I look for when I personally hire, I look for a hard work ethic, someone that has a great personality and a hard work ethic. Those are the two things I think we can overcome a lot if you're hiring someone that has a good work ethic and a good personality. I think qualifications go a long way, obviously, but I think it's important to fill your schools and your students full of people that are happy to be there and that love kids.
Okay, education funding and establishing budget priorities is an annual exercise and a challenge. How will you address our many needs within the reality of financial resources and ultimately ensure that what we value is reflected in our budget?
I do teach school budgeting classes. I adjunct teach school budgeting classes as well as school law class through Indiana Wesleyan. And I have students from all over the nation attending my classes. But as far as school budgeting and priority goes, I do believe looking at facility audits as well as curriculum audits, trying to, if we don't have one, how soon can we get one? And looking to see what your highest priorities are based on those audits and really putting the funding toward your highest needs. And I think we have a lot of really intelligent people here that we can pull together and make that plan.
Thank you. How will you navigate the external and internal politics and factors that drive many of the discussions concerning the future of public education? What can our legislators and community leaders expect from you?
I think we have to put students first. I think there's a lot of issues that tend to get in the way, but if we can focus on students and what is best for them, specifically the standards. I think we're here to teach students the standards, and that has to be our guiding principle. To me, it makes a lot of other decisions easier, not based on what is best for me or based on what is best for certain staff, but really, is this a good decision based on what is good for our students?
So the question about the legislatures and the community leaders, what do you see your role being with regards to them?
That would be one of the first meetings, I think, meeting with the legislators, looking at some of the bills that's already being presented and any of those that might have an impact on public school systems, and how can we make sure and put in our voice and be proactive to ensure that it really is best for the school system and for the students. But meeting with legislators, I think, is a priority. And I had a great relationship with my legislator back in Indiana. I was invited to the State House, not just to testify, but to be behind chambers and to help meet with other legislators and present some of the issues that we're seeing on a public school level. And there was some great success that came out of that.
How have you balanced the intensity of being a superintendent with your own social and emotional well-being?
I tend to work a lot. That might be my weakness, so to say. But I'm an early person. I typically get up at 5 and work. So if I spend time with my children, I'd rather work in the mornings while they're asleep, so that in the evenings I have time to attend basketball games, volleyball games. I have time to see my family.
If offered this position, what can we expect from you during the first 3 to 6 months of your time on the job?
I think getting around to visit all of the schools, meeting individually with all of the principals, the administration, all of the department heads, that would be top priority, is just getting around and being visible, attending faculty meetings, meeting with the staff, as well as the other local stakeholders from county government to the university level, setting up meetings, just letting them know that I'm available here and how can we start forming these partnerships together if we don't already have them formed. And then priority-wise, just looking to see what needs to be done before next school year. I'm a to-do person, a task person, so let's find out what has to get done before next school year and let's start working on that.
What questions you have for us?
Such a large group. What vision are you looking for in a superintendent? Are there specific qualities, characteristics, traits that you're looking for?
Go ahead.
Well, the pages and pages of input from the community that you referenced probably gave you a sense for the way that the community is thinking about this, and I think our board is similar. We have a list of things that we're looking for, but above all, I think we are looking for a person who can embrace what's great about the district, be authentic about where we need to grow, and help the school and larger community pull together to do that.
Okay.
I think one thing that I would like to see is development of our current staff so that we have people that are growing into positions so that we're not looking outside. Again, in the future, we have people that are coming up that know the school and know what they're getting into before we get to this point.
Thank you. Before leaving Indiana, we started one of the first Grow Your Own teacher education programs within the high school setting, where students were taking education classes and graduating and having a paraprofessional license when they graduate. And then that would set them up for if they planned on going into the education field. So it was a mindset of how can we create our own teachers here.
As the parent of a current college sophomore who's going into elementary education, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Those are all very good things, but I have a bias, I guess, where I would like to see the superintendent also up and knowledgeable about trends across the nation and learning and being very data-driven.
Thank you.
Do you have any more questions for us?
The relationship with the superintendent, how has that been in the past? Is that something that you're looking at, a strong board superintendent relationship?
I think for myself, especially being the chair this last go-around, it's very important to have that close relationship with the superintendent because not only with the chair, but with the board entirely, I think, and that's one thing I've been able to do as a chair is to make sure that not only am I being informed, but that everybody else. But with the last two, and I've only been with Mark Thane for a short while, and then Dr. Watson, and now Mr. Lodge. So I think having that connection with them is what really helps leads our school district.
Thank you.
Anybody else can jump in too.
Well, I think that is a relationship that has to be open, and I think all of